Okay, well, I think we can probably get started. So, just to introduce myself for everyone, my name is Christopher Naif. I am an Energy Program Specialist with DEP and one of the individuals who is part of the executive committee for the Pennsylvania Climate Change Resiliency Network. So that network was started by a coalition of 8 different state agencies in the Commonwealth to create a network which can provide training, information, networking opportunities, and also in-person tours and opportunities to learn more about climate change impacts, resiliency, and adaptation across Pennsylvania. So a part of that process is trying to provide webinars and in-person events to serve that purpose. And today is the first of those events. So we have a webinar with the Mid-Atlantic Clean Hydrogen Hub. Manny Citron, the VP of Partnerships and Community Engagement for Mach2, was nice enough to join us to go through what they're doing at the Mach2 Hub right now. And if you're anything like me, you've heard a lot about hydrogen and the potential opportunities going forward for fuel and to mitigate climate change impacts, but you maybe have a lot of questions about it, how that works, and what it's going to look like going forward. So Manny has agreed to join us here today to talk about that, and I will go ahead and turn that over to him if he's here. What a second ago. One second. I know he's here. I have to get him set up.
There we go.
Okay, sorry about that, Manny.
No worries. Let me turn my camera on also. Yep, camera on. There we go. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. So, Chris, this is the inaugural meeting. So would you like me to do a really good job and make the bar harder for all future presenters, or should I just like do okay and make it easier for everyone else?
Whatever you're most comfortable with, I think.
Let's aim for as good as we can make it. So thank you, Chris. Thank you for the invitation. Really glad to be here to do the presentation to the Climate Network. If any of the people on this call were a few months ago in June on the Community Advisory Committee call, this is going to be a very similar, very familiar presentation to everyone who was there previously. But I'm more than happy to give it to this crowd. Let me do a little table setting, and then I'll do the. Am I able to share? No, sharing is still grayed out for me. So
All right, let me see if I can fix that. If not, I can go ahead and do that.
Yep.
Okay. Looks like I might have to do it, which is fine. I can run through that for you.
Yeah, no problem. So let's put that up in just a second. So let me, or put it up now.
Oh, sorry.
No worries. Actually, in some ways this is better because usually I'm looking at the screen without looking at I'm looking at the screen with the slides without looking at the screen with the Zoom call or the Teams call or whatever. So there's always like a little bit of a disconnect. So let me do a little table setting and then I'll just get into the presentation. So I think what do we have? We have an hour scheduled for this call.
Yes.
All right, my presentation is not going to take an hour, folks. Typically 15 to 20 minutes, and then happy to open it up for questions after that. So the way these slides are structured is they talk first about what we are doing as Mach2, and then after we talk about Mach2, we talk about kind of hydrogen in general in the context of the entire U.S. So with that setting in place, I guess let's go to the next slide, please. All right, so what is Mach2? Kind of why us, right? I'm not going to read directly off the slide. I'll just give you the narrative of it, right? We are a purpose-built organization. We are a nonprofit that was established in response to a federal opportunity announcement, an FOA. That's what the federal government calls an RFP. And that FOA was to put in bids to be a developer of a regional clean hydrogen hub. So we are one of 7 regional clean hydrogen hubs that were selected. Our role as the purpose-built nonprofit that is managing this hub is, all the bullet points you see there, right? Manage the federal H2 hubs grant across all the project phases. There are 4 phases to the project, and we'll talk more about those later. And what that management really entails is coordinating this project management for producers, for end users, and for the connectivity between those individual projects, coordinating the timing, coordinating the steps that are occurring in what step and in the timeline that's supposed to happen. We are the coordinator writ large for Mach 2 for community benefits, community engagement, including Justice 40, which is a requirement from the Biden administration that says 40 cents of every dollar spent on a grant like this and other federal grants has to go to benefit what are qualified as disadvantaged communities. There's a measure that the US EPA has developed to identify what those disadvantaged communities are. That's based on census tracts, and we'll see that in a little bit. We have a slide with that on there. Part of this, we are the person to require compliance with environmental, federal, other regulations. NEPA is going to be a large part of the application, especially in phase 2 of the process, which is the permitting phase, and also to coordinate workforce and labor relations and workforce development across the hub as a whole, and also on the specific projects that we're talking about. So let's go to the next slide. This will kind of talk a little about project flow and process. All right, so how do we do this, right? The analogy I use, and I don't always like sports analogies, but I do think it makes sense here, is that Mach 2 is kind of the quarterback for the U.S. government. Chris did
sorry about that.
No worries. So there are 12 subrecipients that are part of our hub, and between those 12 subrecipients, they have plus or minus about 20 projects. Separate from those 12 subrecipients, there's also the workforce development side of it. We are the person there to manage all that, so the U.S. Department of Energy does not have to manage 12 individual contracts and make the kind of the ecosystem connections happen between all of them. So that's the value add that we bring to the federal government and to the taxpayer as part of this process. And to our subrecipients, the value add that we bring is, we coordinate this all for them, and we do the pass up of all their reporting back up to the Department of Energy, and we also help them establish kind of their chain of ecosystem from producer to end user to distributor. Where are the offtake agreements and things like that. Let's go to the next slide. Great. So what is our approach? So and we'll see. I think it's the next slide or the slide thereafter where we have our map. But we are So we are Mach 2. We're the Mid-Atlantic Clean Hydrogen Hub, and how we are defining that, and how we defined that in the application that we gave to the Department of Energy is Mid-Atlantic. For us, our footprint is South Jersey, Southeast PA, so Philadelphia and all of our collar counties, and then the state of Delaware. So that is our footprint where our projects are located. And we are looking at green and pink hydrogen for the Mid-Atlantic. So that is the production and use of green and pink hydrogen. So some folks on this call, I think, know this. For everyone else who doesn't, there's like a color wheel, I guess is the best way to describe it, for hydrogen. And the colors on the wheel indicate kind of the source and the cleanliness of the hydrogen in terms of the carbon emissions that come from that production of hydrogen. Green hydrogen is produced by using renewables, wind or solar to generate electricity, and you use that clean electricity to produce the hydrogen. Pink comes from nuclear, which once you have finished building the nuclear facility, right? And we don't have any new nuclear facilities in the U.S. I think actually we might be permitted for one out west. So we have like a 0 to 1 new nuclear facilities in the U.S. Once you've finished building it, right, it runs for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years without any further use of carbon, right? You're not using any carbon, you're not emitting any carbon dioxide to power the nuclear facility, right? Any carbon that was emitted was in the construction phase, but then you have, you know, a tail of 30, 40 years where you're not producing or emitting any carbon dioxide. So those are the two greenest ways to produce hydrogen. We have a little bit of biomethane, which we can talk about when we get to that slide. That's about, I want to say three plus or minus 3 to 5% of our total production. But by and large, green and pink hydrogen is how we are proposing to produce it for the Mid-Atlantic. The reason for that is we think that there is a specific use for clean hydrogen, right? This is our thesis of WIMOC 2. We think there is a specific use for clean hydrogen to reduce emissions in what are classified as hard to electrify, hard to decarbonize industries, right? And that is, you know, truth in advertising. These are industries that are very difficult to electrify otherwise. Chemical manufacturing, steel, cement, logistics facilities, heavy duty trucking, heavy transit, such as, you know, buses, ports, marine vessels, parts of aviation. The percentages you see on the screen, those are percentage of greenhouse gas emissions at the national level, right? So that's what we're looking at. 23% of national US greenhouse gas emissions come from industrial facilities, 28 from transportation, from this heavy transportation uses. We think that the play for hydrogen is specifically to help abate carbon dioxide emissions or greenhouse gas emissions generally in these hard to abate industries. We also say that the way to do this right, if we do this right, this is an opportunity to create and also retain good union jobs in our region, and in a way where, you know, we follow the practices of a just transition, where workers who have put their lives and careers into being workers in the energy field, right, just because the US energy economy is shifting under their feet, they should not be left out of the opportunity to transition to newer and cleaner fuel technologies such as hydrogen. Also, right, part of our reason why I've said, I think 3 times, our focus is on hard to electrify is, you know, the last bullet point there, we do see that there is a reason. We think there's a very good reason for electrification in many sectors of the economy that make the most sense. Residential, light vehicles, commercial buildings, things like that, we absolutely think that is much more likely to be the direction of electrification than hydrogen. If you want to take it to kind of your personal vehicle that you drive in, right? I think realistically, most, you know, if you have your Honda or your Ford or whatever, electric or hybrid electric, right, gas electric hybrid, probably the way that we'll see that market move in the future. But it's to the heavier vehicles, the buses, the semi trucks, and vehicles around ports where we see that is the use to replace diesel as the fuel for hydrogen. Let's move to the next slide, please. All right, so I've mentioned Justice 40 a couple of times. And this is our slide. We have like the triptych here of what's kind of going on here. So I'll start with the one on the right. Right, this is looking at the size of hydrogen demand potentially, and it's color coded based on kind of what the end use is, right? So there's some cement, there's some gas to power, there's some glass, right? All in our region. Christopher, is this going to be shared with the attendees?
Yes.
All right, yeah. So I won't spend too much time on that. Y'all can zoom in and like see where the colored dots are, but that is our footprint, our region of where we are looking at as terms of potential end use, potential, you know, off takes for the hydrogen that is produced. Moving to the middle, right? This kind of gets into our theory of like why here, right? There is these Justice 40 goals require 40% or more of the benefits of this federal spend to accrue to disadvantaged communities, right? So the one on the very left is the disadvantaged communities as identified by the EPA inventory that will determine that. You can find the link to the mapping tool is down there. You all get the slides. You can go there, you know, whenever you get a chance. For anyone who's from our region, right? Like you look at the at the slide and you say, this makes sense, right? So what is it? What are the highlighted areas, right? So for us in PA, and I'll focus mostly on PA for this call, right? It's areas in and around Philly. It's areas up the waterfront heading towards, on the way towards Trenton, but not quite there. And then it's areas in Delaware County down along the waterfront, right? Whether it's your Chesters, your Lower Chichester Township, Marcus Hook, Trainer Borough, right? All those areas that hit the triggers that EPA is measuring to identify what is a disadvantaged community. And those also, as we'll see in a couple slides, right? Those also overlap a great deal with where our potential project sites are located. And in the middle slide, which I was talking about a minute ago, right? So that's particulates. That is hot. We are one of the hotspots for particulates in the U.S. Right. This is like I live in South Philly. This is the air I breathe. If you live anywhere along that line where it's red to yellow to more red, this is the air you breathe too. So we see the value to hydrogen specifically in helping to decarbonize, especially the diesel industry, and reduce those particulates from the air that we all breathe. Let's go to the next slide. So how will we produce hydrogen, right? So hydrogen is produced, I'm going to read a little bit off the slide here because it's just easier to do it. Hydrogen is produced using clean energy sources, wind, solar, nuclear, also a little biomethane. Low to zero carbon electricity is then used to, you run water through what's called an electrolyzer, which truth in advertising, it zaps the water with electricity, separates it into hydrogen. And hey, Liz, I just saw a comment from you. I'll get to that once I get to comments. Good to see you on the call. Zaps the water into hydrogen and oxygen. The hydrogen is then stored, and then it's used either as fuel cell, or you can also use hydrogen as a combustion source, as an alternative to diesel or an alternative to natural gas in a larger industrial facility. So let's go to the next slide. All right, so I've talked about electrolyzers a little bit. I really enjoy this slide because it really gets a sense of like the difference in scale. So if we think about what power plants look like commercially today, right? They are, there are these big footprints with like pipes and ducts everywhere, and there's like fire coming out the top of things sometimes. An electrolyzer is the size of a trailer. This is a 1 megawatt electrolyzer, about the size of a semi-truck trailer. 1 megawatt electrolyzer gets you to plus or minus a half ton of hydrogen produced per day if you're running it 24 hours a day. So this gets really interesting in terms of the concept of what does it look like when you want to scale this, right? So you don't make a bigger electrolyzer, you just put two of them next to each other. Right, so if there was a company that needed a very bespoke use of hydrogen, very limited in the terms of tons per day, right, production could be solved by 1 to 2 or 3 or 4 of them, right? Once you want to get into larger, more industrial numbers in terms of production, it's 20 of them, 40 electrolyzers gets you to 20 tons per day, which gets into the range of industrial uses. But when you consider that compared to kind of the traditional footprint, right, there's a lot of land that can be repurposed and reclaimed from industrial sites that exist and that may be mothballed specifically for hydrogen production. Let's go into the next slide. So I had talked a little about the different phases of the project. There's a lot going on here, but let me start by, right, there's kind of the 4 bars on the graph. So these are the 4 phases of production that we envision for Mach 2. There are 4 phases, phase 1, 2, 3, and 4. That is a requirement of the Department of Energy in how the grant was structured. What phase 1 is phase 1 is our subrecipients, the partners that we have on this project, getting to 30% on their engineering, and then also getting to site selection if they have not selected a site yet, and also standing up what the community engagement process will be for each specific site, with us as there to help facilitate or co-facilitate, depending on how mature the community engagement that the specific user already has is, and also for us to stand up our hub-wide community and workforce advisory committee to help us keep a look at, the hub as a whole, and where, what are our blind spots? Because of course we are going to have blind spots when it comes to community engagement, and the way to solve those blind spots is to make sure that we have as wide and as deep of a bench of people that we are talking to as possible. So that's phase one. And I said 30% of the engineering. Let me kind of back in and give a little kind of peek under the curtain here. For our application to the Department of Energy, the subrecipients who are part of that application, they had to get to 5% engineering. So for any of us who've done kind of this type of scoping out before, right, 5% engineering, typically that's what you can do in-house. That's what, if you have internal staff, it can take them, several days, maybe a week to get to 5% for engineering on a project. Because that's, that's really like kind of back of a napkin level. It's not quite that big, but it is easy enough for a company to get to without like dedicating spend to it. 30% is when you get into the real spend, and that's where you really get to making decisions on moving into phase two or not. So phase two, the goal of phase one is to get our subrecipients, all 12 of them with all 20 projects, into phase two. Phase two is when they begin their permitting process, including any NEPA permitting, any environmental permitting, and also whatever like state and local, municipality or borough or township permitting that they will need for their projects. Right during phase two, they will also complete the remainder of their engineering work, and that leads us to phase three. Phase three is when shovels go in the ground, and phase four is when work has been completed and we are looking at just general ongoing operations of the hub. In general, we anticipate that there's, between the different projects and the different timing of those different projects, we think that some of them will move a little quicker than others. We anticipate that there will be some portion of hydrogen that is, ready at the project level to move from phase two into phase three before the rest of the project moves into phase three. And that's where we see that we're anticipating there will be some production already, even as early as phase two. But I think that's, all expectations are that's towards kind of the later half of phase two, where really the bulk of production comes online in a permanent way in phase three and then continues in phase four. So I'm going to talk about the percentages, right? As we indicated, 70, all told, let's look at the 10-year build out. 77% of production is predicted to come from green hydrogen, which is hydrogen produced through renewables or through wind or solar renewables. That is the source of the electricity. 20% of the overall hydrogen production anticipated to come from nuclear sources, 3% from biomethane, biogas. That is a project which is currently under proposal by Philadelphia Gas Works for everyone here in Philly. 3% of the total production of the hub, so I think that's 7 or 8 tons per day. That project is proposed. It's not confirmed that they will do biomethane, but that project is proposed as a partnership with the Philadelphia Water Department. So wastewater treatment plants naturally produce methane. It is one of the byproducts of the processes that they use to break down all the waste that gets into the wastewater treatment plant. The Philadelphia Water Department, I want to give them credit. They have a ton of renewable natural gas that is created that way every year. They have found many creative ways to capture it and use it to the best of their ability, I think. But in a good year, I think there's just a volume produced that the Philadelphia Water Department only uses about half of the biogas that comes off their plants. The rest is flared. It is combusted from carbon, from natural gas into, right. So then you have a release of CO2 rather than a release of methane. We believe that, and PGW believes that they can capture the excess that the water department does not use and instead use that to produce hydrogen. That would be produced through a process called SMR, steam methane reformation. You shock methane with steam, and it separates out into the hydrogen and the carbon molecules. That is not your scientific definition for it, but I'm not a scientist, so that's going to be good enough for this call. There's definitely people who can get into the details on that. The challenge for that process is the SMR process is known and understood very well. The challenge is, what do you do with the carbon that is the byproduct of the steam methane reformation process? So PGW they're doing their math. They are looking for what is the correct solution to the, in this case, it would be 7 or 8 tons a day of carbon that they would produce through this process. A requirement of the grant of the hub award is that if there is SMR used, there has to be a carbon capture, utilization, or storage end use for it. Right, so the capture part, easy enough to do. The utilization or the storage is where PGW is still kind of figuring out the details. They have informed us and also informed the Department of Energy that, depending on how the math works out, they may pivot to not do the SMR project and just do the electrolyzer for green hydrogen production instead. But in any event, right, we are a extraction-free hub. There is no natural gas coming from a wellhead. That is part of the Mach 2 proposal. We're really proud of that. We made that as a very specific choice when we put together our application to the Department of Energy, and right, we think that is the right solution for our part of the country. Let's move to the next slide. All right, so here I'm going to go a little quicker here. These are some maps that we have, right? Shows PGW, shows PSEG, which is looking into a site. Enbridge is another one of our partners. They're also looking into our site. Monroe Energy is one of our partners. They are looking to be a user of hydrogen. Let's go to the next slide. Right, and this takes us a little further afield to First State Hydrogen, to PBF Delaware City Refinery, Chesapeake. Chesapeake Energy is one of our partners, like further down south into Delaware, and then Holtec is one of our industrial partners in New Jersey as well. Next slide, please. So this slide is kind of a general idea of our footprint. These are people that are either we are talking to or are actually partners of ours or subrecipients of ours, or folks who are just engaged in the ecosystem and have been in multiple conversations with us. Right, transportation applications, industrial and commercial applications, a lot of labor, workforce, and community outreach. We have hydrogen producers, people who are trying to innovate new ways of hydrogen production. We have supply chain folks. We have lots of education and research and development support, including University of Delaware is our lead partner there. Penn and Drexel are part of our educational partnerships, and also Cheney University, which is the oldest HBCU in the nation, is one of our educational partners. They are developing a hydrogen training program on their campus, and right, they are looking really specifically towards how do we create a certificated program to meet the idea of a portable credential for people who may already be operators in the energy field and want to be able to transition into work in hydrogen, or would want to enter into the hydrogen field and have a safety training certificate that they can take to employers. Let's go to the next slide. All right, so the bottom of these slides are different. These are OCED, the Office of Clean Energy Demonstrations. These are some of their slides, which I've added to our presentation. OCED is the kingdom within the Department of Energy that holds the funding for the Hydrogen Hub grants, and also for several hundred million other, or several hundred billion other grant programs as well. So, this is the idea. So I gave you kind of the why us. This is more of the Department of Energy, the White House version of why hydrogen. What is our theory for hydrogen in the U.S.? So, let me say, and it's not on the slide, but really specifically, the goal of this program from the goal of this program from the U.S. government is they want to ensure that hydrogen companies in the U.S. have first mover advantage over companies in China, over companies in Europe. They see that hydrogen is being pursued really aggressively as an alternative fuel source, specifically for hard to abate industries in these other regions. And they want to make sure that US companies have a way to get in on this, get in early and be innovators and leaders in the field for decades to come. Overall, right, as I've said, right, this is our theory. This is the theory of the US government. Hydrogen is part of a suite of solutions, right? Electrify everywhere we can, but for those hard to electrify, hard to decarbonize industries, hydrogen is an answer, especially when it comes from green hydrogen production that can help us reduce our carbon footprint in our region and across the entire US. Next slide, please. Right, so here's kind of the whole government approach. A couple things to point out here, right? First is the idea of a hydrogen shot. So, right, there was the moonshot back when. The idea now for a hydrogen shot is to get the price, the wholesale price of hydrogen from producers to end users to $1 per kilogram by 2031. I think, we are doing everything we can to get us there. We know right now, based on the math that all of our subrecipients have done, that hydrogen produced using green technology can be competitive with diesel, which is more than $1 a kilogram. And as a kind of a baseline comparison, 1 kilogram of hydrogen plus or minus 1 gallon of diesel, right? We know that is competitive with the price of a gallon of diesel right now for green hydrogen production. We know also that the US government, separate from the 7 hydrogen hubs, they have a $1 billion set aside, billion with a B, set aside for what they call the demand initiative. So the hydrogen demand initiative is looking to do price supports to bridge the gap between end users' ability to pay and the producer's ability to produce, to get us to real market demand within the next 10 years. The only other thing I'll point out here is the IRA tax incentives. So the IRA is the Inflation Reduction Act. I think that we don't call out enough when there's like real elegance in government. These hydrogen hubs, they were not part of the IRA. They came about 8 months earlier as part of the IIJA, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, that created this, this pot of several $1 billion for the hydrogen hubs. The next summer, the IRA was passed, and in that it included tax incentives to further incentivize the production of hydrogen, of clean hydrogen specifically. So between the cost share that our subrecipients will be receiving as being part of the hub, and also the IRA tax incentives, which are separate and distinct from the cost share they get from us, the U.S. government has done a lot to incentivize and make tenable and viable the idea of building a regional and then national hydrogen ecosystem. All right, next slide, please. So you'll see this, you will get this when you all get the slides. Each of these is a link to different US government resources on hydrogen. There is a lot to read up on. I will admit that I have not completed reading all of this because none of these are short. But there is a lot of great information here. And if you are interested in learning more about hydrogen, number one, reach out to me. But number two, please go ahead and follow these links. And I think the next slide is the last slide. Cool. All right, I'm going to take a sip of water and then happy to open it up for questions.
All right, thank you, Manny. Everybody, as far as questions, if you can just raise your hands, I believe you should have that capability. If not, then let me know, and I will go ahead and make sure that I can unmute everyone. I don't see anybody yet. Oh, there. Okay. So Rachel has a question. You should be able to unmute yourself now, Rachel.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. I'm curious where the nuclear energy is planned to come from.
So the partner of ours that is proposing to use nuclear energy is PSEG. So to be determined which nuclear site they will be pulling the nuclear energy from. And so let me give a little more detail here. PSEG is proposing to produce hydrogen, and they are proposing to, I guess, buy their own nuclear energy to be the source of electricity for that hydrogen that they produce. Still TBD is kind of which specific nuclear plant that they operate, because they operate more than one. Still TBD is which specific nuclear plant, if it's any one specific, or if they draw a little bit from multiple plants to be the source for those electrons.
So it'll be an existing plant, it sounds like.
Yes.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Okay, I don't see anything else right now. I had a quick question. What I understand that there's a lot of different partners, a lot of different moving parts with this. What do you guys have in terms of like a timeline, even if it's just a loose timeline right now? I know that you had a couple of dates on this one slide that was showing the rollout.
So let me talk about that, because that's a really great question. So the President Biden came to Philly last year in October and announced that all these awards were going to happen. We have been in contract negotiations with the Department of Energy since last October till today, still in contract negotiations, although we are very near the end to actually enter the contract with them. So we are pre-phase one. What phase one starts when we and the Department of Energy bilaterally sign our contract. I will say out of the 7 hubs, the very first one to sign was, I think, 4 weeks ago. Then there was one 3 weeks ago. Then there was one 2 weeks ago. Then there was no one last week. So there's still us plus 3 others who have not signed. Our goal is, I'm saying end of this month. We are nearly done in terms of all of the detail work, and to kind of give everyone a sense of kind of what this is, right? We have a series of go and no-go criteria for us as the hub, as the kind of the manager of the program. And then for each of our 12 subrecipients, there's subrecipient specific go and no-go criteria. We have been, right, so there's that. Then there's separately from that, there is budgeting, there's project plan, there's staff plan. All of these items need approval from DOE. And for all of the parts that impact our subrecipients, right, this gets into the idea of us as quarterback, right? We have 12 subrecipients with 12 legal teams, all reviewing their version of the contract documents, which we are aggregating, putting that back up to DOE, pushing back down their responses, and managing that process. So it's been a bit of a long process to get there, but we are nearly there, and we're hoping to get underway officially in the next few weeks. So what happens when we get underway? Let me kind of pivot to that part. And I see that the questions are starting to jump in on the chat. So let me answer quickly. We have been working with DOE and with our project partners on what is our kind of our press release and our press approach for once we do the announcement. Initially, they wanted to just do it as like, you know, DOE does like weekly grant announcements. They didn't want to make a big deal of it. Now they want to make a bigger deal of it. So when we are announced with it, we will be releasing our press packet to any interested party, to all the major news outlets, and we will also be working with DOE to host some events that they are interested in co-hosting with us on, whether that's in person or virtual town halls, still TBD. Additionally, and this is a kind of what we've worked through with DOE that they've vetted and approved. When the announcement that we are under contract goes out, we will also, Mach 2 will also be announcing that we will do town hall on our that we will host. As part of the virtual town hall, we will have the opportunity for people to submit questions for Q&A for us. We will be, and as part of registering for the town hall, we will focus during the town hall on what is phase one, because there's a lot of these projects are so big. The hub is such an ambitious idea over the next decade that we want to make sure that people understand kind of this is the phasing, and this is what to expect and when to expect it from us and from all 12 of our subrecipients. And then as part of that, right, so we are going to announce virtual town hall and Q&A on the town hall, and also we are going to put live on our website at the time that we announce that we have a contract and we are underway. We will also put in a link to say, would you like me to speak to your specific community or advocacy organization, whether it's place-based or issue-based, right? We know that there is a lot of thirst out there for us to. Oh, thank you for putting my contact info in the chat.
Sure.
We know that there's a lot of desire for us to be as accessible as possible. We are doing, we and I personally are doing our best now in this kind of pre-award phase, but certainly once we have an award, there's more to talk about. So we will we will give out community groups the opportunity to book me to speak at their next event, and that will be whether it's virtual or in person. That's how we will manage kind of the more localized community engagement as well.
Lindsay, you had your hand up a second ago. Did you have a question, or should I read the ones in the chat?
You can go through the chat. Thanks.
Okay, sure. Okay, there was a couple of questions in the chat. One from Michael Brennan. It said hydrogen burns much hotter than natural gas. We haven't found guidance from boiler manufacturers on offering both warranties on existing equipment and specs on burners or boilers that could handle the switch to hydrogen or even 5% hydrogen blend. Any resources or insights you could provide?
Yes, but let's caveat this that I am providing this as a layman. I'm not an engineer, but I will say we've had a number of conversations with Siemens, the industrial company. They have some internal specs that they have shared with us that help identify kind of what is the percentage of blend that at least Siemens burners can get to at a safe level. Michael, shoot me an email after this. I will connect you to the folks on our team who have that information, and if appropriate, we'll put you in touch with the Siemens contacts so they can walk you through it. Can't tell from your question whether or not you are with a manufacturer or someone who's burning natural gas, but certainly if you are, I think we can make that connection happen pretty easily.
As engineering, but so Rebecca Collins has a question. You should be able to unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you. So actually, this is building off of Mark's question in the chat. Just thinking about transportation of this of hydrogen. So for buses, just transport it like you transport gas, right? And you're filling up a tank at a location. But for an industrial kind of use, how is that going to get from production to the end user?
So we are still working through the fine details on that. We know that there are underutilized and unutilized pipes in rights of way that are not suitable for hydrogen now, but could be refurbished in a way that does make them suitable for hydrogen. So one of the companies we have been talking to is a company named Smart Pipe. Does anyone know what PHMSA is on this call? I'm going to Google the acronym. PHMSA is the U.S. Pipeline Hazardous Materials Safety Administration. So PHMSA is the people who thumbs up or thumbs down any new technology for pipelines. So Smart Pipe is plastic-based pipeline that does not suffer from some of the welding joint and embrittlement issues that metal pipelines would suffer from if exposed to hydrogen as to be a hydrogen carrier. SmartPipe is near the end of the PHMSA approval process. They are one company that we've talked mostly with, but I think there's like 2 or 3 others that are also trying to get to market with a specific for hydrogen plastic-based pipeline as well. So that is one of the opportunities for the delivery. I think that, Rebecca, it's actually a really interesting question because one of the things that we are looking at, and I think it's going to be interesting to see how the hydrogen industry evolves, is whether hydrogen is kind of hub and spoke, produced at one location and then piped out through hydrogen approved pipelines, or if it is more of a like just-in-time production where users of hydrogen will put an electrolyzer on site and then not have to deal with a large connectivity question. I think it's still too early to figure out what that answer is for industry. I think we're kind of all going to be in the petri dish watching that play out. But it's a really good question. I don't think there's any more specific answers to it that I can give them that right now.
Got it. And just a follow-up question, when you showed the slide about like the phasing of production, there was that demand line on top. Was that demand line just based on like transportation and industrial uses in this area? Like how, yeah.
And so that's the demand line. Our understanding is that we will be most likely have a bit more of a thirst for demand than we have for production, which is by intent at the moment, right? I think the kind of the bigger hump to get over in terms of kickstarting a hydrogen ecosystem is that the people who will be producing hydrogen know that they have buyers set up, right, to 2 years, 3 years down the line when the hydrogen production facility is done. They know that they have buyers that will take the hydrogen from them on a regular basis. So having slightly constrained supply, make sure that they know that they'll be able to make sales.
Great, thank you.
Okay, I think that kind of covered Mark and one of Brian's questions as well. But Brian Smiley also asked, is anyone working on emergency power generation using hydrogen for building scale solutions?
Not that I am aware of, but someone should. So let me say one of the no, but this is actually a really interesting question. Some of the conversations that we have been specific with the idea of airports or hospitals where there has to be backup power generation in the event of a large outage on the grid, whether it's a storm or a heat wave or whatever, right? Right now they have that, but it's in the form of diesel engines, which are loud and stinky and also emit diesel fumes into the air. Absolutely, one of the plays that we see is possible for hydrogen is as an alternative or replacement fuel to the diesel engines. I don't know that anyone in the market is producing those yet, but I'm sure it's on people's mind.
Okay. All right. I think that covers all the questions that are here so far. Did anybody else have anything that they wanted to ask at the moment? Yeah.
Oh, let
Brian.
me just answer to Liz because I got a chance to read through. Hey Liz, sure. I think I'm on those EPA Region 3 calls. I haven't seen one in my inbox for a minute, but yeah, looking forward to the next call.
It looks like Brian has another question. You should be able to unmute yourself, Brian.
Yep. Okay, great. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. My follow-up to the the reuse of the pipes, and thank you for that answer, is that for these hydrogen generation locations, are there plans to expand renewable energy production close to those hydrogen generation sources so you can minimize grid loss in transporting the electricity?
Yeah. So Let me, so first, yes. Second, great question. And third, never mind the grid loss. Our subrecipients are more worried about just the charge that they would have to pay to PJM to get the electricity delivered to them. So for them, each of our producers who have proposed hydrogen production have also proposed on-site some quantity of behind the meter, which is like, kind of their own personal electricity production, mostly through solar. I think some of them would be considering wind depending on site conditions. But yeah, that is one of the things that our producers are looking at, because it is expensive to buy electricity through the grid, and that is one of the reasons why the tax credit for clean hydrogen production is set to $3 per kilogram.
Okay. So, don't see anything else. Was there, I mean, like, does anybody else need to raise their hand? I know that Elizabeth wasn't able to unmute a second ago when she was trying to. I just don't want to cut anybody off before we try to wind things down. Okay, that seems like it. So I do want to thank you again, Manny, for volunteering and coming to do this
Yeah.
and talk to us all about this. I think that this is a topic that a lot of people are interested in, and as you could see, have a lot of questions about, myself included, and that we'll be looking at going forward, especially now that we've received the climate pollution reduction grant here at DEP for the industrial sector. Then there may be some crossover in terms of the application of what you're doing and that grant program. So those are things that I think we'll definitely be paying attention to going forward. And I want to thank you again for joining us and talking to everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for the great questions. Thank you, Mark. I saw the note just pop up. And let me also just add before we all go, if any of you want to get into a deeper conversation, feel free to reach out to me. Probably it'll be me. It might be one of the other people from my team, depending on how technical the conversation is, but happy to engage as much as possible with all of you. And, this is also thrilled to be the inaugural speaker to the Climate Network. But this is, one of many ongoing conversations that we fully intend to have over the next decade of operation of the hub. So good to meet you all, and I'm sure we will all meet again on calls and in person sometime soon.
Sure. And just for everybody, I will be sending out an email with the slides from today, as well as Manny's contact information. And we do have a slate of events. Everyone should have at least seen the email for the next event as well, which is going to be the in-person tour of the solar array aquaponics facility and electric school buses at the Steelton High Spire School District on August 29th. We also will have a webinar on guaranteed energy savings agreements in September, and the link for that will be coming out pretty soon. So that's it for now. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.